Dear chess friends, this MVP brings the fifth part of my international chess course of the Caro-Kann defense. And now we will talk about the closed system arising after second move d3. e4, c6, d3, d5, knight d2, e5, knight gf3, bishop d6. The first move is queen e2. Black must ignore the threat of taking the d5 pawn by playing knight f6. Once I played queen e7 in a classical game, and d4, white has a slight advantage because the pawn on d5 would be isolated, and the queens will go from the board. So knight f6 is a good move because it takes d5 is bad. C takes d5, knight takes e5, castle king side, d4, rook e8, knight df3, knight c6, bishop e3. White has to give the pawn back, knight e5, d takes e5, bishop e5, castle queen side. But here comes bishop f4, h3, bishop e3, f takes e3, bishop d7. Black has an attack on the c file, so that line is a disaster for white. The best continuation for white already here is g3, but we will analyze the fifth move g3 later, and the queen is already on e2, so the white's possibilities are not so great now. And if white plays the main continuation d4, then it takes d4 follows. Of course, e5 is a disaster after castle king side, so it takes d5 must be played, bishop e7, and here white has to play a novelty, d takes c6, b takes c6, knight b3, c5, but black has no problems because they defended the d4 pawn. And if knight takes d4, then castles, because in the game white played queen d1 and it was a disaster. After knight takes d5, knight to f3, bishop b4, bishop d2, queen b6, black has an attack, bishop e2, bishop takes d2, queen takes d2, queen takes b2, castles, knight d7, and black is just pawn up, lost again Boyesma, Netherlands 1994. The better move for white was queen f3, but bishop g4 follows, queen b3, rook e8, ignoring the material losses. And if white plays bishop to bishop c5, black has an attack, but if white takes the second pawn, the things are going even worse again, because black can play queen takes d5, knight e2, knight bd7, queen b3, queen a5, a3, knight e4, and of course the sacrificed pawn is nothing because white can't finish the development. So the queen e2 is a tricky continuation, but if black plays knight f6, everything is fine for black. The next white's possibility is bishop e2. I think that move is slightly better than the more frequently used move g3, because after knight f6, castles, white hasn't committed the d3 square yet. Once Hare Krishna in a game against Vashyeva Graf in 2014 played b3. Here I think after knight bd7, bishop b2, rook e8, white had to play rook e1, and black must choose such setups. They must play queen c7, then b6, and bishop b7, and it is like in the Ruy Lopez opening, reversed the Breyer's variation. So queen c7, bishop f1, and even a5 can be played with the idea of a4, then b6, bishop b7, or bishop a6, c5, and so on. It is a very strategically complicated position, but the chances are probably equal, and who plays better chess can win this position with both colors. If white plays c3, then rook 8, we already know the setup, that black has to choose rook e1, knight bd7. If bishop f1, then queen c7 with that setup, and if queen c2, a5, knight f1, and here black can play an interesting move. First of all, they can play h6 with the idea of knight f8, knight g6, and the second interesting move is a4, grabbing the space on the queen side. Bishop g5, h6, bishop h4, and here black is playing black, so they can choose the move d takes e4, because it leads to an equal game. If black were white, of course, that kind of exchange was nonsense, because the rising position is around equal. So d takes e4 is an interesting move. D takes e4, knight f8, with the idea of knight g6, knight e3, then black plays knight g6, rook a d1, knight h4, knight h4, queen c7, knight h5, and black has moved bishop c5, and they are already slightly better due to the pair of bishops. So rook e d1, but then knight g6 follows, bishop g3, queen c7, rook d2, and here black can play bishop c5, or rook e1, bishop e6, and black has slight advantage because their bishop on c5 is better than white's bishop on e2, and the black's position is slightly more active. So it was the move bishop e2. The rising positions are complicated, and the main, of course, continuation is g3, knight f6, bishop g2, castles kingside, castle kingside, rook 8. But here black has an idea of grabbing the d3 square if white plays c3. The best of possibility for white is the breaking the center d4 with an equal game. I think that it's slightly funny. If white plays b3, then a5 follows with the idea of a4, of course, bishop b2, a4, and if a4, then knight e6, and knight goes to b4 with the possibility of b6, bishop a6. So a3, knight bd7, bishop b2, queen c7, rook e1, and black can play d takes e4, playing on a small advantage. The more solid continuation is knight e4, d takes e4, knight f6, knight d2, bishop e6, protecting the c4 square, queen e2, bishop c5, h3, rook a8, and here of course white had to play knight f3 with the equal game, but in the game Lister against Rasmussen Copenhagen 1985, white played knight c4 and bishop d4 followed, c3, bishop a7, and of course here both white's bishops are just amazingly badly placed, and they have also weaknesses on the queen side. Rook a d1, b5, knight d2, knight d7, b4, knight b6, very technical move. Knight comes to a4, c4, knight h2, rook d7, b takes a5, knight a4, bishop e1, queen takes f5 with a big advantage for black, and black wins this game. If white plays d takes e4 instead of knight e4, the white player doesn't change the knight, and black has an advantage. So b5, of course, now knight is badly placed on d2, knight h4, bishop f8, queen f3, slightly strange move played in the game Hickley against Rasmussen, Germany 2004. Here black's best move was a4 with an attack on the queen side, knight f5, a takes b3, c takes b3, knight c5, bishop goes to e6, and white has big problems on the queen side. If knight h6 check, then g takes h6, queen takes f6, and knight d3, just winning the material with decisive advantage. And after rook d1, bishop a6, and black has big advantage. The white's option is knight h4, but black has very interesting move, knight a6. White wanted to play f4, but now f4 is bad due to e takes f4, g takes f4, knight g4, queen e1, and black has an excellent move, knight b4, with decisive advantage. So white has to play a3 and knight c5. Black has a good position here because they can play a5, a4, then b6, bishop a6, and what it has no ideas at all. So the main continuation is rook e1, knight bd7, h3 is nothing, queen c7, knight h4, a5, knight f5, bishop f8, knight f1, knight c5, and white has a good piece. It is their knight on f5, but they can do nothing with the only good piece. For example, g4, here black already can take on e4, d takes e4, bishop f5, e takes f5, rook a d8, queen e2, knight d5, and black are playing on dark squares. They want to play knight f4 and has a slight advantage. So c3, queen c7, and it is a very popular position. White can play d4, and I think it is a good sign because white are playing on equality already. D takes e4, knight takes e4, knight takes e4, rook takes e4, knight f6, no symmetry, rook e1, e4, knight d2, bishop f5, knight c4, h6, knight d6, queen d6, bishop f4, queen d7, and it's a pity, but white can't play bishop e5 due to knight d5 and bishop e4 is impossible due to bishop e4, rook e4, f6 with decisive advantage for black. So queen d2, rook a d8. It was a game Hintika against Sovorshenkin, Yuvaskala 2001. White has a pair of bishop, but black wants to play c5, so the position is slightly better already for black. The other possibility is h3, but b6, and then bishop can go to a6. We will see such nuance later. Queen c2, a5. If a4, then b6, and the idea of bishop a6 is very strong, so white has to play d4, e takes d4. If knight takes d4, then bishop a6, knight for f3, knight c5, e takes d5, rook e1, rook e1, knight e1, rook e8, knight df3, c takes d5. It is a game Posh Kolubovich Obervar 2001, and the white's position could be good, but they can't finish their development, so black has a big advantage here. So the other white's option is c takes d4, d takes e4, knight e4, rook e4, rook e4, knight e4, queen e4, knight f6, queen c2, bishop b7, and black has slight advantage due to white's isolated d4 pawn. So knight f1 is the main continuation, but then black can play d takes e4, d takes e4, knight c5 with idea b6, bishop a6, knight h4 with the idea of knight f5, but black can play g6, and on bishop g5 then can play bishop e7. White has knight on h4 that is out from the game, and the black's idea b6, bishop a6, rook d8 is too strong, so black has a slight advantage. So what we can say about this continuation? The move queen e2 is a trap, and black can play knight f6, ignoring the threat to e5 pawn. The other white option is bishop e2, and I think that is the best option because very complicated position arises, and who plays chess better, that player wins here. And the main continuation g3, I don't like that continuation at all, because white has to play c3 at some moment, and then the d3 square is too weak. However, the rising positions are also complicated, but from theoretical point of view, black has an excellent position, and if you are losing games in such variations, then it is your fault and not as a bad position after opening. So thank you for watching this video till the end. If you like it, you can consider leaving a like, and see you next time.